പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട സഖാക്കളെ, സുഹൃത്തുക്കളെ, AIDSO രാജ്യമെമ്പാടും ദേശീയ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ നയം 2020 പിൻവലിക്കണമെന്ന് ആവശ്യപ്പെട്ടുകൊണ്ട് നിരവധിയായിട്ടുള്ള പ്രൊട്ടസ്റ്റ് പ്രോഗ്രാമുകൾ, ഓഫ്ലൈൻ ഓൺലൈൻ ടോക്കുകൾ സംഘടിപ്പിച്ചു വരികയാണ്. അതിന്റെ ഭാഗമായി നമ്മൾ ഇന്ന് ചർച്ച ചെയ്യുന്നത് ഉന്നത വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ രംഗത്ത് നാഷണൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസി ചെലുത്തുന്ന നെഗറ്റീവ് ഇമ്പാക്റ്റുകൾ, പ്രത്യാഘാതങ്ങൾ എന്തൊക്കെയാണ് എന്നാണ് നമ്മൾ ഇന്ന് ചർച്ച ചെയ്യുന്നത്. നമുക്കറിയാം, നമ്മുടെ രാജ്യം ഇന്ന് എല്ലാ ഫീൽഡിലും വളരെയധികം ഒരു ഡാർക്ക് സ്റ്റേജിൽ കൂടിയാണ് കടന്നു പോകുന്നത്. രാജ്യത്ത് ഇംപ്ലിമെന്റ് ചെയ്യുന്ന യാതൊരു പോളിസീസും അത് കൺസേൺഡ് ആകുന്ന കാറ്റഗറി ഓഫ് ആളുകളുമായി കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുകയോ അവരുമായിട്ട് ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യുകയോ ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു സാഹചര്യം നമ്മുടെ പാർലമെന്ററി ജനാധിപത്യത്തിന്റെ യാതൊരു സംവിധാനങ്ങളെയും ഉപയോഗിക്കാതെ യൂണിലാറ്ററലി ലോസുകൾ പാർലമെന്റിൽ പാസ്സാകുന്ന ഒരു കണ്ടീഷനാണ് നമുക്ക് ഉള്ളത്. സോ as part of that, ഈ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസിയും നാഷണൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസിയും കൺസേൺഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ടീച്ചേഴ്സ്, അക്കാഡമീഷ്യൻസ്, സ്റ്റുഡന്റ് ഓർഗനൈസേഷൻ ഇവരോടൊന്നും തന്നെയും കൺസൾട്ട് ചെയ്യാതെ കേവലം കുറച്ച് മതസംഘടനകളും ABVP ആയിട്ട് മാത്രം ചർച്ച ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ട് ആണ് ഈ ഒരു ഡിസാസ്ട്രസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു നാഷണൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസി, ഒരു എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസി ഇവര് ഇംപ്ലിമെന്റ് ചെയ്തിരിക്കുന്നത്. ആക്ച്വലി ഇത് ഇംപ്ലിമെന്റേഷൻ ലെവലിൽ എത്തിക്കഴിഞ്ഞു. സോ അത്രയും തുടക്കം മുതൽ തന്നെ ഒരു അൺഡെമോക്രാറ്റിക് ആയ രീതിയിൽ ഒരു ഇംപ്ലിമെന്റേഷൻ കൊണ്ടുവരിക എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് നമ്മുടെ രാജ്യത്തിന്റെ ഒരു ജനാധിപത്യ സംവിധാനത്തിന് വളരെ നാണക്കേടുണ്ടാക്കുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യമാണ്. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെയാണ് നമ്മൾ ഇത് ഡ്രാഫ്റ്റ് ഇറങ്ങിയ സമയം തന്നെ അതിന്റെ എല്ലാ സാധ്യതകളും പ്രയോജനപ്പെടുത്തിക്കൊണ്ട് ഡ്രാഫ്റ്റ് വായിക്കുകയും ഈ ഡ്രാഫ്റ്റ് തള്ളിക്കളയണമെന്ന് ആവശ്യപ്പെട്ടുകൊണ്ട് നമ്മൾ രംഗത്തിറങ്ങുകയും ചെയ്തു. പിന്നീട് ഇത് ഇംപ്ലിമെന്റേഷൻ ലെവലിൽ ഇത് ലോ പാസ്സായപ്പോഴും നമ്മൾ രാജ്യവ്യാപകമായി നമ്മൾ പ്രൊട്ടസ്റ്റുകൾ ഓർഗനൈസ് ചെയ്യുകയാണ്. നന്ദിത മാഡത്തെ പോലെയുള്ള നിരവധിയായിട്ടുള്ള ടീച്ചേഴ്സ്, പ്രൊഫസേഴ്സ്, അതുപോലെ തന്നെ വിദ്യാർത്ഥി സുഹൃത്തുക്കളോടെല്ലാം അണിചേർന്നുകൊണ്ടാണ് നമ്മൾ ഈ നാഷണൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസിക്കെതിരെ പ്രോഗ്രാമുകൾ നടത്തുന്നത്. സോ നമ്മൾ ഈ നാഷണൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസിയെ പറ്റി സംസാരിക്കുമ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് ബേസിക്കലി ഇത് മനസ്സിലാക്കേണ്ടത്, this is an education policy which does not talk about education. Even the term education is not there, I think. കേവലം ഇത് കമ്പോളത്തിന് വേണ്ടി വിദ്യാഭ്യാസത്തിന്റെ മുഴുവൻ ഘടനയും റീകൺസ്ട്രക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന രീതിയിലാണ് ഇതിന്റെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ പൊക്കോണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. നമുക്ക് ഫ്രം ദി എലമെന്ററി എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ നമുക്ക് അതിന്റെ ചേഞ്ചസ് കാണാൻ സാധിക്കും. നമുക്കത് ഇവിടെ വളരെ വിശദമായിട്ട് ചർച്ച ചെയ്യാൻ സാധിക്കില്ല. പക്ഷേ ഫ്രം ദ വെരി ബിഗിനിങ് നമുക്ക് ഈ വിദ്യാർത്ഥികളുടെ ശാരീരിക വളർച്ചയോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ അവർക്കുണ്ടാകുന്ന ബൗദ്ധികമായ, മാനസികമായ വളർച്ചയ്ക്ക് സഹായകരമല്ലാത്ത, അതിനെ ത്വരിതപ്പെടുത്താത്ത രീതിയിലുള്ളൊരു റീകൺസ്ട്രക്ഷൻ ആണ് ആക്ച്വലി നാഷണൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസി ഫോർവേഡ് ചെയ്തിരിക്കുന്നത്. സോ ഇൻ ദി കേസ് ഓഫ് ഹയർ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ, നമുക്ക് ഈ ഹയർ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ രംഗത്തെ ക്രൈസിസ് ആക്ച്വലി ഇറ്റ്സ് എ പാർട്ട് ഓഫ് ഈ നാഷണൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസി. ഇതിനു മുന്നേ ഉള്ള എല്ലാ പോളിസീസ് എടുത്താലും ഹയർ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ ഫീൽഡിനെ ആകമാനം തകർക്കുന്ന പോളിസികൾ ഇതിനു മുന്നേയും ആവിഷ്കരിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആൻഡ് വി ഷുഡ് അണ്ടർസ്റ്റാൻഡ് ദാറ്റ് ദിസ് ഈസ് എ continuation policy of the previous government which has passed in 1986. We can see the implementation of new education policy by the UPA government. അപ്പൊ നമുക്ക് ഇതൊരു കണ്ടിന്യൂഷൻ ആയിട്ട് വേണം വിലയിരുത്താൻ. ആക്ച്വലി ഇതിന്റെ ഷുഗർ കോട്ടഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഇതിന്റെ വാചകങ്ങളും മറ്റു കാര്യങ്ങളും ഒക്കെ കണ്ട് ഇത് എവിടെയോ കണ്ട് പരിചയമുണ്ടല്ലോ എന്നൊരു കാര്യമാണ് നമുക്ക് തോന്നുന്നത്. കാരണം ഇതിന്റെ പ്രീവിയസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള പോളിസികളുടെ ഡോക്യുമെന്റിലും ഇതേ വാചകങ്ങളും കാര്യങ്ങളും തന്നെയാണ് അതിനകത്ത് രേഖപ്പെടുത്തിയിരിക്കുന്നത്. അപ്പോ ഇത് ഒരു കണ്ടിന്യൂഷൻ പോളിസിയാണ്. കാലാകാലങ്ങളായി വിദ്യാർത്ഥികൾക്ക് ജനാധിപത്യ അവകാശം നിഷേധിക്കുന്ന, പണമുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ മാത്രമേ പഠിക്കാൻ സാധിക്കൂ എന്നൊരു സ്ഥിതിവിശേഷം വരുന്ന ഒരു സംവിധാനമാണ് ഈ നാഷണൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ പോളിസി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. അതിന്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ട് MPhil കോഴ്സുകൾ നിർത്തലാക്കുന്നു, PhD സീറ്റുകൾ വെട്ടിക്കുറയ്ക്കുന്നു, ഗൈഡുകളുടെ എണ്ണം വെട്ടിക്കുറയ്ക്കുന്നു. അതുപോലെ UGC എന്ന് നമുക്കറിയാം, ഗവൺമെന്റിന്റെ ഫസ്റ്റ് ആൻഡ് ഫോർമോസ്റ്റ് the only interference the government should do is to fund the education, and the government is the primary body to fund the education. But the aim of national education policy is to withdraw from the funding. അല്ലാതെ യാതൊരു പൊളിറ്റിക്കൽ ഇന്റർഫറൻസും ഗവൺമെന്റിന്റെ ഭാഗത്തുനിന്ന് വിദ്യാഭ്യാസത്തിന് കൊടുക്കാൻ പാടില്ല എന്നുള്ളതാണ് റിനൈസൻസ് മൂവ്മെന്റിൽ നിന്ന് ഉണ്ടായിരിക്കുന്ന മോഡേൺ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷന്റെ കാഴ്ചപ്പാട്. പക്ഷെ നമുക്ക് കാണാം, അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ജനാധിപത്യ സംവിധാനം പതുക്കെ നിലച്ചു പോവുകയും ഗവൺമെന്റ് റെക്കമെൻഡ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ബ്യൂറോക്രാറ്റ്സ്, ഇൻഡസ്ട്രിയലിസ്റ്റ്, കോർപ്പറേറ്റ്സുകൾ അടങ്ങുന്ന ബോഡികൾ ഇതിന്റെ തലപ്പത്ത് വരികയും ഇത് മുഴുവനും കൺട്രോൾ ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു സംവിധാനം ഉണ്ടാവുകയാണ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ നമുക്ക് ക്ലിയർ കട്ടായിട്ട് മനസ്സിലാവും ഇറ്റ്സ് ഫോർ ദി മാർക്കറ്റ്, ഇറ്റ്സ് എ ഗ്രോയിങ് മാർക്കറ്റ്. അല്ലാതെ അടിസ്ഥാന വിദ്യാഭ്യാസം പകർന്നു നൽകുന്ന മാനവിക വിഷയങ്ങൾ, അതുപോലെ ശാസ്ത്രം, ഗണിതം, ഇതിലൊന്നും യാതൊരു ഡെപ്ത് നോളജും കൊടുക്കാത്ത, ജാക്ക് ഓഫ് ഓൾ ട്രേഡ്, മാസ്റ്റർ ഓഫ് നൺ എന്നൊക്കെ നമ്മൾ പറയുന്ന പോലെ എല്ലാം അറിയാം പക്ഷെ ഒന്നും ആഴത്തിൽ അറിയാത്ത ഒരു തലമുറയെ ഡെലിബറേറ്റ്ലി സൃഷ്ടിച്ചെടുക്കുന്ന ഒരു പോളിസിയാണ് NEP. സോ ഞാനത് കൂടുതൽ ദീർഘിപ്പിക്കുകയല്ല. ഇതിന്റെ ഈ ഹയർ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ രംഗത്ത് എന്തൊക്കെ കോൺസിക്വൻസസ് ആണ് NEP ചെലുത്തുന്നത് എന്നുള്ളതിനെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് നമുക്കിവിടെ ഓണറബിൾ ഗസ്റ്റ് നമുക്ക് വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. And we are so grateful to have you as the keynote speaker, ma'am. The teachers are truly the inspiration to the students to work against this anti-democratic laws. So from the bottom of the heart, we invite Professor Nandita Narain, who is the lecturer, who is the Associate Professor of Department of Mathematics at St.Stephens College, and also the former President of the Delhi University Teachers Association, and also a prominent leader of the JNFME movement. I sincerely invite Professor Nandita Narain to deliver a few words on the topic consequences of NEP 2020 on higher education. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I didn't understand everything that you said, but I gathered the sense of it. And so I just want to give a quick background, since you mentioned that the policies that we are now dealing with are not only brought by this government, but the previous government was also following similar policies. I just want to give a very quick background to how education policy in our country has been made and changed, and how this policy is actually a quantum leap into a totally different way of looking at what public funded education should be, or rather it is like a death knell. It is a blueprint for the complete destruction of public funded education. So just to take you very quickly through that, I had actually put list of dates on the board, which you might have taken a photograph of, the kind of developments ever since our political independence, and how the founding fathers had understood that simply by getting political independence, we will not, the people, the citizens of this country will not be able to share in the fruits of that independence. They will not be able to genuinely be able to enjoy democracy if they're not empowered to do that. And given our centuries of a very unequal social order through the caste system, and then other different kinds of divisions on gender, patriarchy, feudalism, all these things was a very big challenge to how to ensure that every citizen is able to access the fruits of democracy, for which they need to be empowered through education. And that is why public funded education was considered really important, because the government had to take this responsibility, because the government was a trustee for the people, the trustee of all the revenue that is gathered from the people, mostly through indirect taxation and partly through direct taxation. That revenue needed to be put back into the system for the welfare of the citizen. So the people were trusting the government to do this for them. That is why they elect a government. So education was considered one of the very important objectives, and to give affordable, good quality education. And for that, you needed to have these autonomous universities where the government would not interfere in the in the content of education, would give them a lot of freedom, but would take care of the funding, so that the universities would not have to worry about where the money came from, and they could be allowed to grow in a creative and independent manner, and be able to educate large sections of the people. So that was the idea. And 1948, we had the Kothari Commission, that was, the Radhakrishnan Commission, which was set up, and that had clearly recognized this as the goal. And then we, of course, have the Constitution of India 1950, which had several amendments later and very clearly lays down the objectives there. And we have, in particular, Article Article 21A, which talks about the state providing free and compulsory education to all children between the ages of 6 and 14, which was based on Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Also, you had later Article, or maybe even before that, Article 51AH, I want to mention, which talks about the fundamental duties of citizens, including the inculcation of a scientific temper and humanism and the spirit of inquiry and reform. So all these things are part of our constitution itself, both as fundamental rights and as fundamental duties. In 1966, the Kothari Commission had further sort of elaborated on the ideas that had been laid down in 1948. And 6% of the GDP, they had suggested that at least 6% of the GDP should be allocated to education so that we're able to fund it properly and to meet the needs of the people. Till today, that 6% was not implemented. Today, it may be about 4% or something, of which the states give 3.5 and only 1.5 or so, or less than that, is given by the center. Okay, so that is the state of funding that we have had all these years. And we could see that immediately there was a decline in the funding patterns, even to schools, where under the influence of the World Bank and the IMF, from which the government was forced to take loans to rebuild the economy, particularly after the wars with Pakistan and with China. There were strings attached to those conditions, to the loans that were given, and they first attacked the school education, and they would dictate and say that why does the government need to have so many teachers in schools? You can manage with 2 teachers, you can manage with para teachers. Why do you have to get into education, teacher training? Let it go to private hands. So that thrust was already there, and under that thrust, the quality of schools began to crumble. You had, in fact, many schools with only 1 teacher, and you had schools with no teachers at all, with 1 teacher was handling all classes from the KG till class 10 or 12, 11 at that time. And later on, there were many schools without any teacher. So you can imagine how there was a decline in the quality of government school education. It did not happen on its own. This was deliberately done. And certain ideologically interested parties would be taking over the arena of both teacher education as well as school education. There was, running the schools. There was a steep decline in that. So without going into details about that, which even before this NEP came, there were moves in many states to sell thousands of schools because they're not working and they're not doing well and people don't want to go there. So why not just give them up and hand them to private parties to run those, take the land and the building and do whatever they want to with that. So this had started happening, called merger of schools. It had happened even before this government had come in 2014. Now, going back a little bit in history again, just to give you an idea of what had been happening. In the 90s, there was a decline also because of the liberalization policy. Even before that, you had in 1986, the new education policy of those days. And we already had many objections to what had come in that, with autonomous colleges and, clear sort of intention of slowly, decline in funding and so on. But in the 90s, it became very obvious. And it was now the turn of higher education. So even the World Bank in its documents began to say that why does tertiary education get funded by government, that is higher education? It should pay for itself. You should focus on school education. So they kind of created a false contradiction between, or a competition between, school education and tertiary higher education, as if because of higher education, school education is losing out, whereas actually it is one integrated whole. When you produce teachers, people with the education degrees, they go back to becoming teachers in school. So it feeds the system. In fact, higher education feeds all other areas. So it was a false kind of narrative, but it was being pushed by the government of the day. And the teachers and people in universities had to fight back against these policies, and we were able to fight back. We got some help from the then heads of institutions, like the chairperson of the UGC or the vice chancellor of our university. They all fought back against the so-called resource crunch or cut in funds. Then in 2000, we had this Birla Ambani report. The NDA government had come in by then. And that was again a blueprint for privatization. It led to the UGC Model Act. That was, a sort of a proposal to have one uniform act across the whole country. This whole business of one act and one syllabus and one curriculum, and that idea was coming in at that time. And in 2000, I just want to mention at that time that 2004, under the NDA government, the whole provision of pension for people in government service, including teachers, was removed. And it is connected with what we call the attack of the neoliberal reforms on the entire economic policy of the government. It is deeply related to what happens in education sector as well. Then in 2005, with the new government, by then the UPA government had come back to power, but they made an offer to the GATS, that is the General Agreement on Trades and Services, in the Doha round, of higher education as a commercial tradable service. And that was really like the beginning of the end. Under the clauses, under the conditions, you had to give all players, international and private players included, a level playing field, because of which you could not continue to give subsidy to Indian service providers, that is Indian universities, if you did not give the same subsidy to all the other players. So that was like signing in almost like a legal contract without calling it a legally binding contract. If you give an offer and don't take it back, it becomes kind of binding on you. So under that, you found that the government was compelled to go on reducing its funding. It could not obviously do it overnight. So it made a plan. Now, while it was doing that process was on. In 2008, you had the huge global financial crisis, which particularly affected the Western countries like the US of A, where the US had to cut back on funding. First of all, it bailed out the banks which had given these loans. So basically, the loans went bad to these big corporates. And in bailing them out, the banks had to be replenished. And they did that. The government did that by cutting back to the tune of 30-40% on health and education sector. And there were huge protests there, but the protests finally failed because the unions were already quite weak. They'd been weakened over a period of time post the Vietnam War. Without going into details on that, it had an effect on us as well, because in 2009, the new Minister for Education, Kapil Sibal, had set up this National Knowledge Commission. And then there were 6 bills which were placed before Parliament, which were again a blueprint for privatization. And they're very much like what the current NEP also has, that there will be no UGC, there'll be one body which was called NCHAER, and then there will be right to go to court against whatever grievances you may have. There was foreign universities coming in, and private universities been given so many concessions, and then a fee hike, then a choice-based credit and semester system. All of that was in the National Knowledge Commission, which was then put into the form of these 6 bills, which would give it legislative teeth, legal teeth. We fought against those, and we were able to get it put on hold. So at least there was a possibility of fighting. You were heard. There was a parliamentary standing committee. We could go and represent there and convince them. And those bills were actually put on hold. So those rights were not completely taken away at that time. You were not jailed for, criticizing the government in those days. Then we had in 2010, I said, these 6 bills. You also had a new Central Universities Act in 2009. The 12 new central universities which had been formed at that time, and then later on it became 18, I think, had these provisions very clearly in which you have credit transfer. And we used to wonder, what is this credit transfer? How can you, in one university, sit in one university and earn credits from another university? So all these ideas are not new. They were trotted out by those people who were behind the formulation of the GATS Treaty and several other treaties, and they were being pushed in every country. You talk to teachers in any country, and they'd say that, oh, we are being given the same script, and how do we fight back? So there was a resistance also going on at the same time. So I just want to mention a couple of the points of resistance also, that we had, of course, these teachers' movements, the teacher-students movements. Then we had in 1991, you had the Mandal Commission, which was, the people fighting for their rights. Then the 200-point roster, which came in later. Then 2007, you got the OBC reservation for the first time. and so on and so forth. We've been going back and forth on that. But in 2010, when both these opposing kind of forces were struggling, people struggling for their rights, and the neoliberal forces, or those who had been allowed themselves to be governed by them, pushing their line for corporatization of health and education in particular. So we had a complete freeze on appointments from 2010. Then we had in 2013, we had the Central Universities Bill, which tried to make a model act for the old central universities as well, like JNU, Delhi University, IGNOU, and all the universities which are central universities. That didn't get passed because the government fell. All right. They pushed in this four-year undergraduate program at that time, and Delhi University was the first laboratory to implement it. But because we had built up such a campaign against it, the government, the opposition parties put it on their manifesto that they will roll it back, starting with the Aam Aadmi Party and then the BJP and so on. So when they came to power in 2014, they rolled it back. Okay. But within a year, they brought it back again. So you can understand that governments may change, but the political masters, the ones who are dictating policy, remain the same, and they just use different people. I mean, I sometimes joke and say they've given a supari to somebody who is going to be able to implement it and be much more vicious in implementation, be able to crush dissent with this communal card that they have, and which will keep the people divided. So resistance will be ineffective. Then we had the CBCS in 2015, then the Higher Education Funding Authority. So all the points of the National Knowledge Commission, which the earlier government, UPA, was not able to implement because there was so much resistance, were brought back again. So the Higher Education Funding Authority, which would give us loans for running universities rather than grants. Then the whole concept of graded autonomy, which was all about self-financing. And then finally, we had in 2019, May, after they won their second term, the National Education Policy. Now, that was in about 448 pages. We had lots of opposition to it. We represented, we had campaigned. JFME, that is Joint Forum for Movement on Education, had a huge gathering, a march in 2019, February, against, the kind of policies they were following. But after the election, this 2019 draft came of the NEP, draft NEP it is called. And then, of course, the pandemic hit us. Now, post the pandemic, it has been like a golden opportunity for the government to push through all kinds of laws, which whether it is the labor law or the farm bill, farm laws, and of course the NEP, because they feel that there is going to be no resistance, and it's true that you're not able to build that resistance on the ground that you could do earlier. I mean, for example, in 2016, they had cut the number of jobs to half by increasing the work to be done by each teacher to double. They'd cut the number of posts by half. And we had a huge protest against that, and we were able to push them back on that because we were able to engage in physical protests. But in 2020, because of the pandemic and lockdown, we were not able to do that. And suddenly, while we are struggling with health crises and other lockdown livelihood crises, 1st of May 2020, the Prime Minister announces that the National Education Policy's soul, Atma, is in online education. So we were wondering, how has this come out of the blue? Nobody's talking about the NEP right now. We're all busy with trying to survive. And suddenly you come up with this, and surely we've all read the draft, 448 pages. There is a chapter on online education, but nowhere does it seem like it is the heart and soul of that policy. So sure enough, a few days after that, if you look at all the business journals of that time, the online journals, there is a news items about Sundar Pichai and Ambani and all these people making huge investments in online education. So then we said, oh, now we know why it was said, because it's a business deal. All right. All right. Then after that, there were a couple of other things that happened. There was a STAR agreement with the World Bank where you, for a pittance that you were getting from them, allowed them to interfere in your school education. Then there was a move to reduce the syllabus of the class 9 to 12 by 30%, in which you removed chapters on citizenship and, freedom struggle, peasant movements, even, science, many things which are very important to understand, infectious diseases and so on, climate change, a whole lot of such topics were dropped. So you can see the ideological tilt in that as well. We also had that through CBCS, the government had been pushing ideological change in, for example, the history syllabus. Yesterday, Professor Mahalakshmi gave a wonderful lecture on that, so I will not dwell on that, but you can see that as well. So then we were expecting something like this, and then we found that on the 30th of July, 2020, the cabinet adopted the NEP in about first it was 60 pages and 6 pages were added. So by the 31st, it became 66 pages, which is essentially a summary of what is there in the earlier draft. And it is certain other things have also crept in, where there's a lot of much more emphasis on online education. So very briefly on the NEP, where you heard about it yesterday as well, the ideological tilt is very clear, that you have, always harking back to a wonderful ancient past, as if everything was perfect in that ancient past, where, Eklavya had to give up his thumb and so on. You had all these, the wonderful times, and then nothing in the middle, and then talked about modern times, 21st century and so on. So as if the middle period, that is the medieval period, didn't exist at all and had nothing to contribute to education, which is far from the truth. I mean, there has all been documented and preserved. There's a diversity even in the efforts to provide education. So whether it is Mahatma Phule and Savitri Bai, or it is, Sir Syed, or it is the Christian missionaries. And there's a huge history of this, and especially during the Mughal period. So we find that there is, all of that is missing. So I will not talk about the ideological tilt right now, because that is clear throughout. I will talk about the thing that is going to be, really going to affect us immediately. Okay. So a few other points that I wanted to make is that they talk about inclusion, but there is absolutely no mention of any kind of reservation policy. There is no understanding of the fact, based on the earlier policies, that people have lack of access to education is one of the biggest issues. And what happens to people from the marginalized sections, even if they manage to make it to these institutions? You have so many institutional failures, and keeping them there and making them feel comfortable. You have suicides, which we call institutional murders, like Rohit Vemula's. There's no recognition of any of that reality. You're simply talking about, going into the future from your ancient past. The other central theme in this is deregulation, that we should not regulate so much, universities and colleges functioning. And the other thing is centralization, which seems contradictory, but it's a kind of taking away the powers of the states, whereas India in the constitution is a union of states, and education is a concurrent subject. All right. So all that is, sort of written roughshod over, and you just have, that the center will decide all these things, and the states will just have to accept it. Okay, so this is the theme that runs through it. And I want to focus on a couple of things which are really going to change, the quality of our whole democracy, if at all, whatever is there, it is a blueprint for slavery, I would say. That is, the two things which they do not want you to look at that very carefully. But now, because it started getting implemented, we are forced to look at it carefully. Otherwise, the rhetoric used in the entire NEP document can be completely misleading. They use the same words that we've been using for years, saying that you should have critical thinking, you should have independent thinking, creative thinking, inclusiveness, and flexibility, and so on. And all that sounds very nice. Okay, but the poison pellets are hidden inside this very fancy looking cake that you're being made to eat. And you have to spot it, that suddenly there'll be one line in the NEP which will say, oh, now where's that come from? And why, and there's no logic offered. So let me just break it into two parts, where you have to look at what is written in NEP 2020 and see it, the detail of it, which is given in NEP draft 2019. Then you truly understand what a dangerous situation we are all entering into. So first of all, there's an academic aspect, academic restructuring. And then there is a governance restructuring. Okay. So I'll very briefly talk about the governance restructuring for 1 minute, then I'll come back to it and I'll focus on the academic for the time being. So in the governance restructuring, they envisage no affiliation. That is given very clearly in 10.12, if you want to have a reference to a number in NEP 2020, that the affiliation system will be phased out. They also talk about 50,000, approximately 50,000 higher education institutions today, which will be reduced to 15,000. Each will be much bigger than it is. It will be having 3,000 to 5,000 students, and there will be multidisciplinarity in them. So as if that is going to be our greatest goal. So that is what is there, no affiliations, and no logic for why there should be no affiliation. And each, for example, Delhi University has about 75 colleges. We will all be on our own. We'll become degree granting institutions, which are called autonomous colleges. But we will be given a board of governors, and currently the governing bodies will be governed by the UGC rules, right? But then in the NEP it says that the board of governors will make all the rules. They will decide everything themselves. What courses to teach, what is the content of those courses, what is the student-teacher ratio, what are the fees to be paid by students, what are the qualifications of teachers to be appointed, and what is the recruitment policy, who sets up the selection committee. The BOG, the Board of Governors, will decide everything. And it is very clearly written in both the documents that the BOG, if you look at the section 17 of the old document here, I have it with me, this is 448 pages, it details, this is para 17.1.8 onwards, about the BOGs, what kind of powers they will have. The NEP 2020 says they will have all powers, they will take all decisions. Okay, that is written very clearly in 19.2. But the details are given in 17.1.8 onwards till 17.21 or 20. And you can see how frightening it is. The BOG will have only 1/3 members from within the institution. So whether it is the BOG of a college or the BOG of a university, right now, we have an executive council. And our executive council has only professors in it, and they have elected representatives in it. Also, we have professors by rotation, seniority. Not that they always exercise their autonomy, but the fact is that they are there. They will be replaced by a BOG, Board of Governors, which will have only 1/3 from within the university. 2/3 will be non-academic persons, of which there will be certain number of government representatives who will be, or the other funders, whoever's funding it, will be having representatives, and they will choose some public-minded intellectuals. And we know who they will put in there. That will be their ideological intervention. So the BOG, 2/3 will be these dubious characters, and then you have 1/3. They will pick the 1/3 from inside the institution based on what they think is their competence, their merit, their loyalty. It's all written there. Their loyalty to the institution and their commitment to the institution. So they will pick those 1/3. And it is clearly written in black and white in one of the paras, that is para 17.1.10. There will be no elected members to any of the bodies or structures within the HEI, other than some bodies of students. So they will allow some student unions to be there. God knows what form they will allow it. But we have been fighting for decades to win some democratization of governance, where teachers can participate in the process of governance through elected representation. Please give me a second. Yeah, I had to just ask my husband to move away because I can hear. This is the pitfalls of this online teaching as well as seminars. So so it's written clearly there. So that democratization of governance and the fact that you are all governed by certain rules and regulations laid down by the UGC gave us a certain kind of independence that, nobody can just throw us out. I will get my salary as laid down by the UGC. I will get my promotion on time as laid down by the scheme, which is there uniformly implemented across the country. I don't have to be in the good books of the authorities to be able to get my salary or my promotion or to even to retain my job. If you want to throw me out, you have to get the permission from a larger authority, that is the Vice Chancellor. Now we'll be no longer part of the university. We'll be on our own and at the complete mercy. It will be like a fiefdom run by this BOG, which will be all powerful. And they've said that it should be run like any other body, which is run by boards of governors in this fashion. All right. Which is, basically the corporate model. It's all there. And so this is what they're envisaging. Basically, all these will be like shops, right? Doing whatever they want. And there's no accountability to any external authority. They have said clearly that they will not be answerable to anyone, but they have to simply put their institutional development plan and objectives on their website. As long as they put their objectives there, they're free to implement it in whatever manner they want to. So this is what is really, really dangerous. If the teachers are not going to be, first of all, we don't know how many of us will remain. If we are not free to give our views, we're not free to teach in the way in which we want to teach, or to make syllabi in the way in which we want to make syllabi. This autonomy that they're giving to the college is only for the management. It is not for the teachers. It is not for the students. So it will actually take away whatever autonomy we have right now, which we have because we're part of a much larger system. And then we give and take. We engage in things together. We make syllabi together. We make we fight together also. So this will ensure that there are no unions left, no large unions left. And in small autonomous colleges, even in the autonomous colleges today, which are much better than what they're planning to do, we don't have any unions at all, right? There's no associations of teachers there. So forget about what is going to happen in the autonomous colleges as envisaged by the NEP. That is, so if you don't have that kind of democratic space, I don't see how you're going to inculcate in students any kind of independent thinking and articulation. If you yourself cannot exercise it, you cannot maybe write an article freely, you cannot speak freely in class, you cannot critique things, particularly government policies, freely in class, and so on. So that is the governance part, which is really, really frightening. But for that, they will have to change the act. And to change the act, they have to go back to the parliament. And they have not gone to the parliament so far. So their plan, of course, it will take them a few seconds to pass whatever they want to pass in parliament, like they did for the farm laws, but they have not yet done that. So that is the next item on the agenda. The first item on the agenda is to weaken us, to begin with, to weaken both students and teachers, and also to push the academic restructuring so quickly that the online business, which cannot wait to make it into the top billionaires in the world, where they've become the top billionaires in Asia, they can be allowed to rake in their profits sooner rather than later. So that, if you see the academic restructuring, there are a few policies which have come in. One was the FIUP 4-year undergraduate program, which is laid down in NEP itself, and it has been pushed across the country. All universities, they've said that 40 universities have already adopted the NEP. The second thing is, or rather, there are 3 regulations which are being pushed, which are like the 3 farm laws. One is the ABC regulation, the second is the MOOC Swayam regulation, and the third is a blended learning education regulation, which is not yet come in the form of a regulation, it has come in the form of a draft. But essentially, the 3 of them have the same idea in mind. So let me just quickly tell you about that, and that is what's really frightening. I know that my university has already adopted the ABC regulation, which was gazetted on the 28th of July, 2021, and it had an amendment in it, which has actually made it worse, on the 28th of December 2021, and it was adopted by us in the original version in August 2021. Right. So what does this ABC regulation say? So before I come to the ABC regulation, let us just quickly talk about our experiences of the last 2 years. This whole experiment with online education was forced on us because of the pandemic. Okay. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that it has been an utter failure. Okay. Now, I teach in one of the colleges which is more privileged section of students and teachers. We have some minimum infrastructure and so on. But even in our college, we find that a whole lot of students did not have the digital devices, or they did not have the connectivity wherever they were. They were not able to access the classes in the same manner, or the quality of the classes was very poor. They were not able to understand. And then many of them have started dropping out. There's even the ones who are privileged. It's very difficult to keep sitting in front of a screen for such a long time and remain engaged. Most students switch off their video, so you don't really know what they're doing, whether they're concentrating on what you're saying or whether they're doing other things, or just token presence is there. Many of them will not answer. Now we can try and push them and grill them and blackmail them and say, I'll give you internal assessment only if you answer in the class. But there's only a certain point till which we can push it, because when it comes to the examination, which is an open book online examination, then there is institutionalized mass copying. Why am I saying institutionalized? Clearly, there are some coaching institutions or other bodies which have got into this business of getting the paper when the paper is announced, whichever day the exam is, and they have people who can quickly solve it, and then those solutions are put out in the to the clients who might have paid a certain sum of money to them, and you will find exactly those, like photocopies of the same thing, coming in the answers. All teachers are holding their heads and weeping and saying, what is this? I mean, the whole thing is a big farce. That is why students don't need to come to class, because they will get the marks anyway. They don't need the teachers. So already they have got used to this very, easy way of doing well in exams without having to work for it. And what does the ABC regulation do in this situation? So already situation is very bad. There have been, almost 80% students have dropped out in schools and colleges because they've just not been able to keep up. You don't have a domestic situation where you're able to give a smartphone to every single, already livelihood has suffered so much. So many crores of people have gone below the poverty line. People are struggling for food. Where is the possibility of being able to give everybody a smartphone or a laptop and a room space so that they can access these easily? And women are the worst hit, because when you're at home, then that space is not really conducive. You're always called upon to help your mother or to take care of the younger child or whatever other thing. It's not considered important to give you your space and that you can access your class. So there has been a huge dropout. There have been, particularly with the women and, of course, people from marginalized sections. Everybody in the country knows today, at the end of it all, 2 years, that this online teaching is a farce. Parents, of course, know it very well. Some students have gotten lulled into thinking that maybe the online exam, open book exam is the best thing for us. But they also would like to come back to their institutions, because after all, education is about so much more than just getting your degree or doing well in an exam. So academically, also, the classroom space is very, very different. It's a space where people from different economic backgrounds, class, community, region come together. I know in our college, which is part of a central university, and we have a hostel, we had students coming from all parts of the country, living together, learning from each other. And the greatest strength of our country, which is its diversity, learning about different cultures, the way people live, what they go through, and maybe picking up and being exposed to different languages. All these things are there. And that is a much bigger part of your education process than just doing well in the exam. As far as the learning, academic learning is concerned, even there's a whole class chemistry. You're in a democratic space where you've left behind all the disadvantages to a large extent that you have in staying in one room with 8 people, the economic conditions of your family, and so on and so forth. Once you land up in this space, then you have a democratic space where you can function, you can participate in that, and you can learn and grow. Students learn from each other. They learn from the teacher. They build a human bond with the teacher. They build a bond with the institution. The institution becomes like a family for them, next to their own family. And that family is something they can always emotionally also fall back on and look back on with great affection, even later on in their lives, and keep up those friendships that they have forged in that period of time. And these are all extremely important things for a human being. What does this ABC regulation do? Now, what will be absolutely shocked to hear, which some of you may already know about this, is in the ABC regulation, you have very clearly written. Basically, what you do is every student who enters into a university will be given a bank account number. Okay, I mean, there's a unique number in a virtual bank, which is an academic bank of credits. Okay, now what are credits? Credits are what you earn every week. You earn 1 credit from 1 lecture, 1 credit from 1 tutorial, and 1 credit from 2 practicals in a week. So these are called credits, which you earn from the courses that you attend or you access. All right. So what the academic bank of credits gives every single student a unique number and has an account. All right. Now, whatever the student is studying, if the university certifies that they've got earned these credits at the end of the year or 2 years or whatever, they are automatically conveyed to that ABC, which agency which manages this portal, and is put into that that student's individual account. You keep adding your credits. What the ABC regulation does is it says that every student is permitted to opt for up to 50% of the courses from other universities. So they talk about what is seamless student mobility between or within HEIs, credit transfer, choose your own learning path, anytime, anywhere, any level, autonomy of student, flexibility, creativity, and critical analysis. The last two, of course, are not going to hold in this, but they claim that they will get. So a student will design his or her own course. You decide that, okay, I'll take this from here, this from there, this from there. That one I can do online exam and do very well in that. And minimum amount that I need to attend classes where the teachers grill us and they don't give us such high marks, I'll attend in that. And the rest of it I will do from here and there. Okay. It is like a patient treating himself or herself. You can take, that doctor had recommended some, medicine for somebody in that. And so you pick from that, then you pick one from somebody else, and you design your own treatment. Is it possible? Can you do without the doctor? Can you just do it yourself? So we who are in this activity of imparting education for decades, we know how hard we work to design a whole curriculum, a degree, in a manner in which the student will learn slowly. You build the foundation first. You grill them in that and make sure that they've got it, and then you go on to the next level. There's a sequence in it. There is an interdependency in it. And of course, you have to keep revising it and you try to improve it. But it's a kind of live process in which, it's not as if the student who enters first year knows what is best for him or her. It's like all the cafeteria approach. You go into a cafe, you pick up a gulab jamun and your tomato sauce and Maggi noodles, and you think you've got your nutrition, but you have not. And you will know later on when you fall sick that you do not have the levels of nutrition that you would have had if you have your dal and your roti and your sabzi and your protein and so on. So we are like nutritionists. We design it. So this is a flawed approach, first of all. And then when you make such a huge component, 50% of your courses, if the students are allowed to take them from other universities, clearly all of those will be online courses. What will they learn? What will be the quality of those? How do we give a degree to you from our university when we have no control on what you have done in those 50% courses? Those 50% courses will include also the Swayam portal, MOOCs portal. What are those? Pre-recorded lectures. But teachers have been asked to, some people have been asked to make pre-recorded lectures, and it's put into that portal. The student can go and take this course from there or this course from there, and that will add to their credits. So all in all, you have up to 50% they take from there. And then you also have a blended learning regulation, which is on the anvil, which says that even the ones that we are supposed to be teaching them at the end, whatever's left with us, even from that, 40% of that we have to make pre-recorded lectures, which they will access online. And we're only there to, solve their problems, mentor them, and correct their assignments. All right. So that's all your role is. And the whole process of learning, which is a painstaking process of learning, is completely forgotten about. You also have a multiple entry exit system in which students may leave after a year and they will be given a certificate. They can leave after 2 years, they'll be given a diploma, and then if they do 3 years, they'll be given an undergraduate degree, and after 4 years they will get an undergraduate degree with research. So first of all, in this whole multiple entry exit business, If a student is going to leave after a year and that whatever certificate he or she gets should be having some market value, then we would design that course in a totally different way. We would do, a little bit of the theory, and then we'll do a lot of the applied stuff so that that person can take it and apply it. Whereas if a student is going to leave after 3 years or 4 years or is going to go into research, the pedagogy and the content are totally different. We will be grilling them on the fundamentals, which we may not. Like a student in an engineering institution will do mathematics in a completely different way from the student who's doing mathematics honors with me. So they will their emphasis will be on the applied or a mixture of different things so that they can take it and use it. Whereas here, it will be very, very different. You have to figure out everything themselves so that they're in a position to do original research in the subject later on. You cannot have a khichdi in which everybody sits in the same place and is given whatever they need, because neither will this group benefit nor will that group benefit. All right. So that is one very major flaw. The people who are likely to be pushed out of the system, instead of trying to keep them in, you will be pushing them out, are women and students from marginalized sections, because the cost of education will go up. Why? Because you will be paying, the student has to pay for the services of that ABC agency. It is written there. Students will pay the fees of that. They will pay the fees of all these online courses that they will be taking from different universities. Instead of being looked after by their university, they will be basically on their own. They call this student-centric. It is not student-centric. It is making the student into a, almost like a solitary confinement. As a prisoner, you're imprisoned within 4 walls, and you're just, having to sit in front of a screen. You develop mental health problems. There is no social activity. You do not able to participate in extracurricular activities. There is no wholesome growth. So it is not really student-centric. It is against the interests of students. And of course, they have removed the teacher from this altogether. Tomorrow, once they have the pre-recorded lectures, they will not need even the teachers that they need today. They can just keep using those lectures. How will the subject grow? How will, once you have these online thing replacing, your formal courses, you will have a very large number of teachers who are in the system being displaced. We have, because of the policies of the government of no permanent appointments from 2010, more or less, we have, for example, in Delhi University, more than 50% of our teachers are what they call ad hoc. They have no increments. They don't get any leave. They have every 4 months, they can be thrown out. They have to be renewed every 4 months, and they're living on tenterhooks. And they're the ones who are handling most of the work of the university. If this comes in and the number of posts gets slashed because you don't need so many teachers, so many students are doing courses from other places, these 5,000 odd teachers, and similar situation will be there in other universities. They'll be on the street. If there are no job prospects in this area, why will students want to do research? Even if they want to do research, there is an NIRF which will be deciding, all right, what you will be doing research in. You will not be free to just do research in whatever area is to your liking. So all these methods of centralization are there, and so this is one of the big academic changes which is coming immediately this year itself. And it's if we just fall over that cliff, it will be very difficult to recover. So the resistance has to be built now. Now, the ploy is not to open the universities, even when the pandemic had eased off a bit and everything else was open, whether it was, malls and, festivals were going on, elections are going on, but universities are remaining closed. They've just destroyed a whole generation, and it will be very difficult to recover. Now, the pressure has to be built on them that they must open the universities and they must allow students to come back. And we have, maybe to begin with, the hybrid form. Those who cannot come, we can address, have physical students sitting in the physical classroom, as well as the lecture being streamed at the same time. They must give some financial commitment. There is no funding which has been assigned to any of these things. While they say that, they say very clearly in 7.4 that there should be digital infrastructure in all these institutions. But there's been nothing done to provide that digital infrastructure because they need funds. We are not Wi-Fi enabled properly. We don't have a high bandwidth. If people go to the college and try to teach online from there, they're not able to because you just don't have the connectivity, even in a really highly rated institution like St.Stephens College. And nothing has been done in the 2 years to build that infrastructure. So in the middle of this pandemic, where there is such mayhem, we have 3 calendars going on at the same time because of the delayed admissions, and everybody is in a state of crisis. Instead of waiting to return to normalcy, they want to push through this really retrograde scheme without any thought, without any discussion with stakeholders, and because they feel that there will be no resistance. So the only way to fight back is like the farmers had fought back. There's no alternative. I mean, if people don't, and this is something that affects every single person in the country. Everybody knows that the child's future is being destroyed with this online education, and it is going to be now made a permanent state of affairs. There will be no, physical campuses left finally, and everything will be just, sort of online, and which is very clearly the intention if you read through this regulation very in some detail. So this is basically what we have coming up in front of us. And along with that, the other 3 models, the FYUP, the multiple entry exit, the digital divide will only make the inequality worse. The more privileged will become the people who are already privileged will become more privileged, and those who are already doing badly, they will be pushed completely below the radar and will not be able to recover. So I think that more or less I have been able to cover the points that I wanted to cover. Yeah, the whole character of the university is being changed. We are a regular course. I mean, nowhere in the world do we have universities in which you have such a huge component of online education. Let us by all means have this as supplementary courses where you can take it from anywhere. But, to make it a part of your regular teaching, your regular courses, to such a large extent is going to completely destroy the quality of your education. Even in distance learning institutions like the IGNOU, the course content is controlled by the teachers in the university. They prepare the courses. They send it to centers all over the country, and it is imparted by human beings to other human beings there in face-to-face. People have classes during holidays. So this is not even a distance learning model. It is a completely strange, hybrid, virtual model in which some people will make a lot of money and everybody else is going to go into intellectual slavery and hence economic and political slavery as well. The students think that they will get more flexibility and more choice. That's not true, because unless you're given funds for having teachers, for having infrastructure, even for the 4th year, no infrastructure has been promised. No, funds have been promised. The budget you have just seen has actually not given you any increase at all. And their focus is only on the digital university and these classes on television. As if you can sit in front of a television and learn real analysis. You can't. I mean, let that be done for those who cannot reach, colleges and universities, which should be expanded. In fact, you should have more colleges and universities. And if you have some who are still left out, or you have adult learners, then there is no harm in distance learning being used for them. But to replace whatever little bit, which is maybe less than 40% today of higher education, is formal, public funded education, to replace that by this hybrid virtual mode, which is not going to do any good to anybody, and it will just push our students, young people, into a very bad place, like I was mentioning earlier, like solitary confinement, with all its attendant mental health and emotional problems, apart from the academic setback. I think it is a great betrayal of the dreams of our constitution and our founding fathers. It's a great betrayal of the people of this country. And that is why we have to take this issue to the people of this country and tell them, see, that's what's happening. They will understand it immediately, because they all know that this online experiment has not succeeded. It is a big failure, and it's going to destroy the lives of their children. So they will understand it. But we must take it to them and build a whole movement like the farmers had built. Without that, how we are going to stop this from happening is it's a very difficult question, but we have to do our utmost to save our universities and thereby save our democracy and save our country. Right? So I think I'll end there. Anything else if you have by way of questions, any details, I will be happy to try and answer to the best of my ability.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You have broadened the oration to prove that how the education has been a commodity to the various parties to implement it smoothly. So we have 3 questions. The first question is, NEP is a shift from interdisciplinary approach to multidisciplinary approach. and theoretical study to skill learning. How will these changes affect higher education? This is the first question. And the second question is, shall I present all the questions, I mean, all together or one by one?
Let's go into one by one. Unless there's an overlap, then we'll say that has already got answered. Yeah, you're right. This NEP 2020 is a shift from the interdisciplinary approach is different in the sense that you have to be well versed in say 2 disciplines or more disciplines, and then you know the at the specialization level you see where the 2 can be interlinked and connected with each other, and then you can do research on the areas where they intersect and where one is used in the other. In this multidisciplinary, you have a number of disciplines that you study at the same time. So we don't fundamentally have anything against a multidisciplinary approach, but it should not be at the cost of specialization, which is what is also required. So but to follow the multidisciplinary approach, you have to be able to have the kind of funds that you will promise us that we're able to employ teachers. It cannot be done online, in a casual manner. So you give us funding, give us teachers, give us infrastructure, we will be happy to offer more disciplines. And we, in fact, in our undergraduate curriculum, we have tried to expose the students to a variety of disciplines. Like science students should be exposed to, totally agree that should be exposed to some study of the humanities and social sciences, and vice versa. So it is something which is desirable, but it is not it will not be achieved by the kind of proposals that they have been making, right? And skill learning, yes, this whole skill thing has been something which has been resurrected. It has been used all over the world. In the US of A, after the Vietnam War, they brought in this semester system to keep students really busy. It was a part of the commercialization process and also the de-intellectualization process. You can't really study anything in depth. And they'd also come, try to push in skill education as if, this is what you need. They tried to push it in our country in the 90s. There was at that time, a committee set up called the Interaction of University with Industry Committee. In the 90s, I was in the academic council. And at that time, they invited, in the members of the committee, they invited even leaders of then, the corporate different corporate families. Lala Bansidhar and others had come, the head of the Shriram Group and all. And at that time, when we met, we found that our critique and the corporate leaders' critique was exactly the same. They said that we do not want you to introduce these short-term market skills at undergraduate level. Please do not do that, because these change all the time. You concentrate on your main discipline, concentrate on increasing to developing the cognitive abilities of the students by having question papers which promote independent thinking rather than rote learning. This is what the corporate head said at that time. So those were completely shelved. Otherwise, in the 90s, they were bringing in fashion designing and mechanics and all that into our undergraduate curriculum. You have a separate stream called vocational education. Strengthen it and provide employment, for heaven's sake, that your policies are such that people are not, there are no jobs. So, this is only going to dilute the whole process. Whatever time you're getting for the academic rigors is being taken away by this so-called skill development. At the school level, it is being used as a euphemism for pushing the students back into their parental occupations, which is basically reinforcing the caste system. All right. So, there are multiple ways in which this is going to affect it. It is a kind of, it's not going to help in people getting jobs. All you're going to do is produce cheap labor, because when you're half educated, you're not going to get highly paid jobs. Whereas what the corporate heads in 90s told us is, we want not people who can just obey orders. We want people who will lead industry. We want people who will take decisions, who will take us into the future, who can break the path, make fresh paths. Today, post-globalization, the corporate sector is not free to talk about what is in the interest of the country. They're not free. And even there, you have certain favored people like the Ambanis and Adanis. So everything is going to be done for their being able to rake unlimited profit. All right. So that you are not getting that kind of support from the corporate sector. You're not getting the kind of support from the heads of institutions where people have been planted as vice chancellors and as chairpersons of UGC. I mean, the latest chairperson of UGC, you can see, after destroying JNU, now he's going to destroy the whole country. So you find that, I mean, he's one person against whom there's a, record number of judgments by the High Court. So, I mean, it's not just my own value judgment. It is, how can you then say that he's qualified for the post of chairperson of the UGC? So you see what is happening. They're just going to toe the line. They're not going to exercise any kind of independence in the matter to challenge the kind of policies which definitely are anti-student and anti-people. What is the next question? Yeah, the common university entrance test. Another big thing that is happening, which they're pushing. I know how they pushed it in our university. They set up a committee only of principals, and they all said yes. And they used, they said that, there's so many Kerala students coming in and all. I mean, you look at the kind of literacy levels and other educational support from government and all that you get in Kerala. You can't just compare incomparables. They could have talked about having, some kind of normalization in which they could, normalize the marks, in which they could then take, reasonable number of people from all the states. They've said we're not even going to try that. We're straight away going to hand it over to an external agency because the university can't handle this, entrance test. We just don't have the manpower or the wherewithal. No university in the world can handle it when you have 20 lakh applications or more. So it's handed over to a private agency, which is another form of making money. And the stories I've heard are actually quite blood-curdling. We don't know exactly what's happening. And these MCQs really don't test anything. And there are only limited number of MCQs that you can keep making. Then you have to keep circulating them. Then there can be leakages. And then people are impersonating others. There are all kinds of things happening. God knows there may be some ideological agenda in it also. Who's going to be able to study in universities and who will not. So JNU has not had a good experience, and the other experiences are also not great. So it is another, and nothing has been sorted out about how it's going to be done. And one more exam that students have to go, and undermining the class 12 exam further. So and then promoting, those who can afford to go into coaching institutes and so on. So basically, you're again favoring the rich. People who cannot afford all of that will be at a great disadvantage. So you're again pushing out those who are already marginalized and have suffered from disadvantages. Okay, so Gotham Barua Commission's recommendation. I'm not aware of the Gotham Barua Commission's recommendation. And multilingualism, yeah, I'm not an expert on that. I mean, this is basically in the school. There's actually not much being done about that. They have the policies that they're following. This FYUP, 4-year undergraduate program that has been brought in, is going to kill all the languages. It's going to kill all the Indian languages because most of those Indian languages are being taught through what we call currently the BA program course, or they are there as the additional courses and honors. In the kind of policy that they've brought in, they don't have a BA program course. In fact, they're totally against the multidisciplinarity, where you study 4 subjects or 3 subjects in equal measure. And so these subjects, which were even in our experiment with the 4-year undergraduate program in 2013, the first time it came, all of them got phased out, and any small department was in grave danger. So it's likely to happen again. So I don't see how they're trying to encourage Indian languages, not at the higher education level. And in the school level, it may just be used to prevent people from learning English, which might be a way of their, going up in. I mean, that the 3-language formula would be good, but exactly how it's going to be implemented is not very clear. So I'm not an expert on that area. So it would be better that somebody else answers it in the next seminar that you have, right? Is that all?
Yes, ma'am, that's it with the questions. And we are extremely thankful about this speech because you have detailed analysis on each policies implemented by the various previous government, which actually led to this NEP to function very smoothly, especially the how the international treaties and agreements, which actually reflected the international corporates to reflect in the field of, how it is directly linked with the interest of these Indian corporates as well. And thank you for this enlightened speech. And ഇവിടെ വളരെ വിശദീകരിച്ച് തന്നെ എല്ലാ ഫീൽഡുകളെയും പ്രതിപാദിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെയാണ് മാഡം ഇവിടെ വിഷയങ്ങളൊക്കെ അവതരിപ്പിച്ചത്. നമ്മൾ ഈ ഒരു അൺഫോർച്ചുനേറ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു കാലഘട്ടത്ത് 70 വർഷത്തിന് സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യം കിട്ടി, 70 വർഷത്തിന് ശേഷവും നമ്മൾ ജനാധിപത്യ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസത്തിന്റെ ഫ്രൂട്ട്സുകൾ ലഭിക്കാൻ സാഹചര്യം കിട്ടാതെ നോട്ട് നിരോധനം നടന്നത് പോലും ഈ പറയുന്ന ജാർഖണ്ഡിലൊക്കെ റിമോട്ട് ഏരിയാസിലുള്ള ആളുകൾ അറിഞ്ഞിട്ട് പോലുമില്ല. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ബേസിക് ആയിട്ടുള്ള എല്ലാ അമ്യൂണിറ്റീസും ലഭിക്കാതെ ഇപ്പോഴും പോവർട്ടിയിലും അതീവ ദാരിദ്ര്യമായിട്ടുള്ള അവസ്ഥയിൽ കടന്നു പോയിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന രാജ്യത്താണ് ഇവർ ഈ ഷുഗർ കോട്ടഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഡിജിറ്റൽ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷനും അത്തരം മോഹന വാഗ്ദാനങ്ങളൊക്കെ കമ്പോളത്തിനനുസൃതമായിട്ടുള്ള ഇത്തരം വാഗ്ദാനങ്ങളൊക്കെ നമുക്ക് നൽകുന്നത്. പക്ഷെ നമുക്ക് ഇപ്പൊ കേരളത്തിൽ പോലും റീസെന്റ് ആയിട്ട് നടന്ന വാർത്ത എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ആദിവാസി കുടുംബങ്ങൾക്ക് ലാപ്ടോപ്പ് ഒക്കെ നൽകിയിട്ട് അവർക്ക് അതുകൊണ്ട് യാതൊരു പ്രയോജനവും ഇല്ല. അവർക്കത് ഉപയോഗിക്കാൻ എങ്ങനെയാണെന്ന് അറിയില്ല, അവർക്ക് നെറ്റ് സംവിധാനമില്ല, അവർക്ക് പ്രോപ്പർ ആയിട്ടുള്ള എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ ലഭിക്കാത്തതുകൊണ്ട് അത് തിരിച്ചു നൽകുന്ന ഒരു സാഹചര്യമാണ് ഉണ്ടായത്. അപ്പോൾ ഈ കേരളത്തിൽ നിന്നുകൊണ്ട് പറയുമ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് ഈ ഡീറ്റെയിൽ ആയിട്ട് ഇവിടെ കൊണ്ടുവന്ന എല്ലാ പോളിസീസിനെയും നമുക്ക് ശക്തമായിട്ട് എതിർക്കേണ്ടി വരും. ഫ്രം ദി വെരി ബിഗിനിങ് ഓഫ് DPP, ദി വേൾഡ് ബാങ്ക് പ്രോജക്ട്, നമ്മൾ ഇന്ന് കൊട്ടിഘോഷിച്ച് നടക്കുന്ന ഒരു കേരള മോഡൽ ഓഫ് എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ, നമുക്ക് ആക്ച്വലി അത് ഏറ്റവും അങ്ങേയറ്റത്തെ ഒരു ഡീഗ്രേഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള അവസ്ഥയിലേക്കാണ് പൊയ്ക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. സോ അധികം ദീർഘിപ്പിക്കുകയല്ല, ഇവിടെ എല്ലാത്തരം പോയിന്റ്സുകളും തന്നെ ഉൾക്കൊള്ളിച്ചുകൊണ്ടാണ് മാഡം ഇവിടെ അവതരിപ്പിച്ചത്.
I have one point, Shalini. I have one point.
Yes,
yeah, if I may. I didn't know when to interrupt you. So, yeah, in the academic part, to just also make a note of this, that, you know, they don't give any logic for why affiliation is going. I mean, it's just that there will be no affiliation of colleges to universities. And second is, there will be no MPhil. Now, why should, you know, there's no academic logic given, and MPhil was one way of empowering particularly people from marginalized sections. And certain subjects, it played a huge role in preparing them for research later, or getting that research experience, like in the English department and others. And, you know, so that will be taken away from them, because now it's not easy for everybody to wait and do a PhD before you can get a job. So the abolition of the MPhil does not make any sense at all. That's one. Then they've also said that those who do a 4-year undergraduate program will have to do only 1 year of MA. But in the 4 years undergraduate program, there is no content of the postgraduate level, none at all. All right, it is just the 3 years content is stretched out and made into 4 years, where they have some projects and all in the 4th year, which we know they'll just get sold in the market, because it's very difficult to then supervise dissertations of so many students. They'll all be buying things from the market. It will be completely a sham. And so your postgraduate education is also being, the quality of that is being reduced to 1 year and is being compromised at this. So there's no thinking which has gone into any of this. Probably these are being made somewhere else and just pushed through, implemented here blindly by the political leaders, right? So that was the only point I had missed out. So I just wanted to add that.
Okay, madam. Okay. So നമുക്ക് സമയം അതിക്രമിച്ചു. നമുക്ക് എന്തായാലും ഇവിടെ അവസാനിപ്പിക്കാം. തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും we expect your further cooperation in our upcoming movements against this draconian act against the democratic education, and we thank you for attending this session. And ഇതിൽ പങ്കെടുത്ത, ഇത് ശ്രവിച്ച എല്ലാ വിദ്യാർത്ഥികൾക്കും അധ്യാപകർക്കും സുഹൃത്തുക്കൾക്കും നന്ദി പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ട് ഈ ഓൺലൈൻ ടോക്ക് അവസാനിച്ചതായി അറിയിക്കുന്നു. താങ്ക് യു.